Welcome to our first season of the podcast, Grow from Darkness. We are your hosts, Amanda Blackwood.
And Chrysanthi Dokos from Coast to Coast. As some of our listeners know, we're both survivors of complex trauma, and it's our mission to help others experiencing similar issues.
This season, we're going to be digging into trauma reactions, their long-term consequences, and how we fight back to live our best lives. Before we even get into it, what are you avoiding? I know, I put you right on the spot every time, right?
You do put me on the spot every time, Amanda, and it's not fair.
Well, the only reason I put you on the spot is because I couldn't think of anything I was avoiding right now other than work.
That's okay. So right now, I am avoiding doing much of anything. I have been renovating my home, and I have two areas in the house at the moment that need to be, the furniture put back, boxes unpacked and everything to go back in. And I'm avoiding that. What else am I avoiding? Dealing with some hard stuff. I was avoiding some really difficult, challenging things in the last few weeks. I have a woman that became a very close friend of mine, seemed to just sort of turn against me, and everything that I did seemed to be something that triggered her, upset her, and she misinterpreted how I was behaving and, had her narrative, but didn't give me an opportunity to talk to her about it. And I was avoiding making some really hard decisions about that relationship and friendship. And so for several weeks, I was just sort of denying it was happening, just sort of let it sit in the background. And yeah, it was really hard. I was just pretending that, it'll all go away and everything will just happily work out.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been there. There's all these minimization terms that we tell ourselves. It's fine. It's going to be okay. This happens to everyone. It's not a big deal. We use these things as kind of coping mechanisms to get us through something that hurts and something that we're not ready to face yet.
Exactly.
When I first started figuring out that I was avoiding things, what I was avoiding was a lot of things. I was avoiding people, friends that I knew. I was avoiding places. I was avoiding smells. I was avoiding anything and everything that could possibly, maybe, kind of, sort of, almost trigger me.
Yep.
Everything. I was afraid. I was absolutely terrified that if I didn't avoid the people that I knew before the Scotland incident, before that trafficking happened, that I would run into them and they would ask me, "Oh, you're back from Scotland. How was Scotland?" And I'd have to face it. I'd have to tell them. My avoidance was absolutely born out of fear. It was a terrible, terrible thing. And I kept telling myself that this was healthy, even though I clearly understood it was anything but healthy, And the list of places that I found myself avoiding, that list just kind of grew. So I wouldn't go back to the same coffee shop after they learned my name. And to some degree, I still do this. So if I go into this coffee shop every single day, eventually they know what I want to drink and they know my name and they greet me by name when I walk in. The second they do that, I stop going back. It's uncomfortable. I don't want them to know me.
That is one of the key responses to trauma. It's a coping mechanism. Sometimes it's a conscious thing, sometimes it's an unconscious thing that we used to avoid dealing with that thing that stresses us when we're not ready to face it. So it's a defense mechanism, a coping mechanism. Yeah.
And I think part of the coffee shop thing is, for a long time, I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
And I didn't want them to know me when I walked in the door, because how are they going to sit here and pretend like they know who I am when I don't know who I am? And that familiarity was frightening.
Exactly.
But the worst, the absolute worst, the peak of my avoidance for physical places or physical activities, I stopped writing. I
Mm-hmm.
was afraid somebody was going to find what I had written. Last episode, when we were talking about the aggressive behavior, I mentioned something about the friend that I had aggressively gone after because she did something that offended me, right?
Mm. Mm.
The thing that she did was when she found out that I was a survivor of human trafficking, she started spreading rumors that I
Mm.
was actually a call girl and that everything that I had been through was my choice.
Yeah.
I was viciously hurt and I lashed out and I started to avoid her and anything having to do with her in places that she might go, even though I knew she wasn't there. You know,
Yeah.
avoidance just like spills over into these other areas.
It sure does. It sure does. And it's a way of not facing.
That is a completely separate thing from not wanting to go certain places.
Exactly. I've got a list here of types of behaviors that are avoidance
Oh,
behaviors.
I love your lists.
So,
This is how you remind me that you used to be a teacher because teachers do this and they're so prepared and I love it.
of course, Miss Goody Two Shoes over here. Oh dear.
Hey, if I'm the teacher, you're definitely the teacher's pet.
I strived so hard to be the teacher's pet, and
Oh, you're
sometimes I
nailing
got
it.
it's devastating. Actually, this reminds me of a story in terms of avoidance because I remember when I was in year 10, we were sitting in a classroom doing some poetry and we had to write about, pretty things like spring and autumn and flowers. And my life at the time was quite turbulent. My poem wasn't about spring and autumn. It actually was, I used a metaphor of a fun park, the roller coaster and the ghost house and various other rides. And I used those as a metaphor for things going on in my life. I thought it was the most brilliant poem I'd ever written, and I still do. And I wish I could remember it. But anyway, I went really happily and showed it to my teacher, and she just turned her nose up at it and said, "What's this? You need to be writing like the other girls. Look at what they're writing about. Beautiful, coloured autumn leaves and the sun shining." And I just looked at her and I thought, I was crestfallen. I was totally devastated. And it took me decades to get my pen back out and write a poem.
Wow.
That was avoidance because I was fearful of the judgment.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So sorry,
And
that just came to mind because we remembered about being teacher and teacher's pet. I was certainly not the teacher's pet in that instance.
well, but it totally fits with what we're talking about today too,
Mm,
that avoidance. I'm wondering if maybe she saw the metaphor in your poems and she wasn't ready to handle it. I
yeah,
think she recognized something in it and she's like, no, 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 no. We can't have this kind of darkness here. I can't handle this. I can't
yeah,
deal with this right now. So it might have
absolutely.
been her having some avoidance issues with your work.
Isn't it
You,
interesting?
you stirred her.
Glad you've reframed that for me. I'm
Yeah.
really glad you've reframed that. That's so cool. Thank you. So anyway, back to our list, Amanda. 13 examples of avoidance behavior.
Lucky number 13.
Yeah. Number 1, escapism, which is what we were just talking about before in your example of when you returned back from Scotland. The next thing is drug and alcohol misuse. And, I'll put my hand up. I've been there. That's not
Me
fun.
too. My hand is straight up in the air too.
Yeah. And it allows you to escape, doesn't it? It blocks everything else out. It numbs you and you don't have to deal with it because you're in this sort of little fog of a world.
Right. I was using it mainly at the height of my actual abuse to try and numb myself during the activities that were
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was my way of trying to avoid having to feel anything at that time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to remember that a lot of this is about the feeling
Yeah.
that we attach to the situation. And, we've talked about shame and all those sorts of things as well. And that all comes into that whole thing of that trauma response. Because as you were saying, you didn't want to face people and tell them that your experience in Scotland was not, a great little, road trip.
Right. Right. It was
Um,
not a vacation.
I imagine that there would have been an element of shame involved in that.
Oh, yeah.
You're wanting to avoid that.
As much as humanly possible.
So the next thing on my list is like wishful thinking and maladaptive daydreaming. Have you ever done that?
Yes.
Mm.
Wishful thinking was a big one for me for years and years. Probably, let's see, I'm 43, so for probably 42 and a half years.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the heavy wishful thinking occurred while I was in Scotland.
Mm.
I had known that man for 7 years before all of this happened. And for a
Wow.
while, my wishful thinking consisted of me wishing that we could have a normal relationship and that he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't bring other people to the home.
Mm. Mm.
I still, in those early days, had aspirations of us having a healthy relationship. Now, tell me that's wishful thinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Highly, highly abusive individual.
Yes, been there, done that. Tick. I can relate.
Yeah.
I can relate. Yeah. And then I've been also guilty of, in terms of wishful thinking, I wish I'd never met this person before.
Oh, yes. Yep.
If I hadn't come across them, my life would have been so different, so better.
Right. And then we start getting into the shoulds again. I shouldn't have
Yeah.
ever gone to Scotland in the first place, and it's my
Yeah.
fault this happened because I went.
Yep.
So that avoidance can definitely bleed over into other trauma responses and stages.
Absolutely. And so that leads on to things like burying emotions instead of processing them.
But and it's interesting. I have known other trauma survivors who never had to deal with because their young brains were so focused on not feeling the emotions associated with the
Mm.
trauma. So their
Mm.
brains figured out that it was something they couldn't deal with, so they
Mm.
simply didn't. They
Yeah.
didn't forget about it, they didn't block it out, but they waited until they were in a more mature mental state to
Yeah.
figure out how to deal with it. And it's
Yes.
so fascinating because that's the only way that I can think of as avoidance being incredibly healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is, a trigger warning for anyone listening to this today. When I was 21, I was violently raped by somebody, an intimate partner at the time. The day after, I just went on with my life, pretended nothing had happened. It was all normal. And, it was my fault that I'd been raped. And, I just needed to behave better so it didn't happen again.
Wow. And I don't know if you saw it or not. I posted something the other day about a group of school students who had been polled on when forced intercourse was okay. I'll
No, I
say.
actually didn't do that. No.
So the study was done it was a Jacqueline Goodchild study. When is rape okay? During a poll of high school students, Jacqueline Goodchild asked the following question: is it all right if a male holds a female down and physically forces her to have sex if, number one, he spent a lot of money on her? Males answered 39% yes.
Wow.
Females said 12% yes.
Wow.
Number two, he is so turned on that he thinks he can't stop. 36% for males, 21% for females said yes.
Unbelievable.
Number three, she has had sexual guys. 39% males and 18% females said yes.
Wow.
If she's stoned or drunk, same numbers, 39% males, 18% yes.
Oh
If
my
she
goodness.
lets above the waist, 39% males, 28% of females said
What?
yes. The next one is she's going to, and then she changes her mind.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
males said 54%, more than
No.
half, said that rape is okay. 31% of females, it was okay. The next one is she led him on. Again, 54% males said that rape is perfectly okay. 26% of females said it was okay. And if they've dated for a long time, whatever they constitute as being a long time as high school students, I don't know. But 43% of males said yes. 32% of females said yes. And if she gets him sexually excited, 54%, 51% of males said that rape is okay at that point. 42%, almost half of the female population that was polled, said yes, rape is okay at that point.
I'm just sitting here speechless. Sorry, Amanda. It's just really, really shocked me. Yeah, it's really frightening.
But see, that's where you're coming into a lot of the self-blame and the guilt.
Yeah.
You know, you were with this romantic partner for a long time when he did this to you.
Yeah, I'd
Right?
been with him for several months. Yeah.
So had you already been intimate?
Yeah.
Was this a normal routine thing for you to be intimate before that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
So you've dated for a long time. You tend to get him sexually excited, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are two of the highest percentage categories for where women say and females say that rape is okay. That means most of us have that self blame and that guilt
Mm,
within us that if
exactly.
this happens, it's my fault and I did this.
I have gone through some pretty hardcore counselling to deal with it. The fact that you mentioned, that the young brain, it's just too much for that young brain to face and deal with until you're much more mature and able to process it. And that's exactly what happened to me. Exactly what happened to me. Burying those emotions instead of processing them is actually, it can actually be an adaptive, a positive thing. Because if I had dealt with it at the time, it could have sent me down a really slippery slope of mental disturbance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I hear birds in the background. I love it.
Yes, I put out birdseed last night and, it's still there. And I've got 4 rainbow lorikeets.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
That sounds
they
gorgeous.
are beautiful. They've got a beautiful bright green back, a purple face, like a strong purple, and an orange and yellow chest. And they're just the most gorgeous looking animals. I love them.
I have to look it up. A rainbow lorikeet. My goodness, look at that animal.
Yeah. Isn't that just gorgeous?
Wow. Man, yeah, you guys listening to the podcast, you already have access to the internet if you're listening to us. You got to check it out. These birds are gorgeous. Oh, man. There's like a patchwork quilt of color.
Yeah. Aren't they just so stunningly beautiful?
Wow. So cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, avoidance again.
Let's get back to my list. Come on, woman.
Yes.
So the next, this is a classic. Self-isolation. Number 5 on the list is self-isolation. How many times have you done that one, Amanda?
Well, if you count the last year and a half, once. The whole year and a half. No, the self-isolation thing has definitely been a big part of my life. There's
Yeah.
times where I just completely drop off the face of the earth and my
Mhm.
friends are like, "Hey, what happened to you? Where'd you go?"
Mhm.
I've lost friendships over this.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
have I have another friend out here who she kind of does the exact same thing. And Colette, if you're listening, hey, shout out to Colette. But we recognize this in each
Mm,
other. It's like, you know
mm,
what? There's something going on. Um, I think she's just going to need a little time. I'll let her know that I'm still here, but if she's not ready to talk about it, she's not ready to talk about it.
mm, mm. Exactly.
And that's one of the most supportive things anybody's ever done, is to recognize that and say, hey, I'm here when you're ready.
And if you can find people, you know, develop friendships where they do understand that. I've got exactly the same thing with one of my girlfriends, and she's been very upfront with me. She's very self-aware and says to me, Chrysanthi, you know, like, I need some time out. Please don't get upset or, you know, second guess or whatever. She said, I'm having some time out. And I might not hear from her for a couple of months. And
Yeah.
then when she's in a good place, she'll be back in touch, and it's fine. You know, I totally understand, because I've been there. I know what it's like. When you're in that state, you just need to hunker down and be a bit like a bear in winter, and hibernate, to allow yourself time and space to just be.
Right.
Because just even the effort, and it is an effort to have a conversation with somebody, is overwhelming when you're in this space.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Let alone deal with anybody else's stuff.
Yeah.
No.
And sometimes that avoidance of people is really handy, because that might be that moment when you're finally starting to understand that you can't avoid your emotions anymore. And you need to process this stuff. You can't do this with a bunch of noise and distraction around you.
No. You've hit the nail on the head, certainly in my experience, that often when I've been in that self-isolating place, it has been facing up to some pretty hardcore things and needing to just unpack things for myself, in terms of emotions, and even, as you know, like you reframed something for me earlier about my teacher, Miss Brown, in grade 10. God bless her soul, she's no longer with us. We need to reframe things as well at our own pace. So it's not just processing feelings, it's actually processing our belief systems and how we see the world. Because having gone through major traumas like we have, in terms of the healing process, your whole way of seeing things changes. Yeah. Next one is avoiding eye contact.
Oh. Oh boy. See, I didn't even realize that was trauma avoidance. Oh my gosh, there's so many things that have just suddenly made so much sense in my life.
Oh, tell me, tell me, tell me.
Oh, I had a hard time making eye contact with anybody as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want people seeing me. I didn't want people to
Mm-hmm.
look through the facade and see who
Mm-hmm.
I was. It was
Mm-hmm.
to the point where, when I was, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, um, people used to comment on my eyelashes all the time. And I took a pair of scissors and I cut my eyelashes off so that people wouldn't comment on them anymore. I mean, it
Wow.
got really bad. It was severe, with my wanting to avoid eye contact and wanting to avoid having people speak to me or talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back from Scotland, I had a hard time getting a job for a while because I wouldn't make eye contact with people. That
Mm-hmm.
was rooted in the guilt and the shame of what I had lived through, and
Yeah.
feeling like that was my fault.
Yeah.
And having that compounded by feeling like I failed that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty twisted. But yeah, yeah, the eye contact thing was really difficult. And I still have issues with that to a degree. If the person that I'm looking at reminds me strongly of a former abuser, the overwhelming dominance of this person, it makes me really nervous, and I can't keep eye contact with them.
Mm. Well, I'm going to move on to the next one. Number 7 is lowering the voice when speaking.
I do that a lot, but I think that's more of a control tactic for me. And I know that sounds really weird, but if I'm speaking to somebody and I lower my voice, they have to lean in and pay attention to me to understand what I'm saying. It's really handy, and I use it on my husband, but don't tell him that.
Oh, you're a scream. You are a scream.
even the Laura Keat out there is laughing at me.
Oh, dear. I think I think what this is getting at, aside from the control situation where, you want people to lean in, I think what this is meaning is that we don't want to be heard. So we lower our voices, avoiding that kind of interaction with somebody else by doing that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense because I think
Yeah.
I've done that in the past too, just not as much as
The next one, this is number 8, is leaving gatherings early.
I've done that most of my life.
Yep, me too.
Wow.
I go in late, so I'm not there at the beginning where I have to make small talk with everybody who's there, and is that sort of initial unease when you're first at a gathering, and I like sort of walking in when everybody's completely engaged in conversation with somebody else, and then that means I can choose where I go.
Yeah.
Rather than somebody coming up and going, "Oh, hi, how you going?" and then having to talk to them.
I did this a lot when I lived in Los Angeles, and I called it my cameo. I got to go make my cameo appearance.
Yeah,
Show up, make sure that people know that I'm there, say hi briefly to people as I'm wandering my
exactly.
way from the front door all the way out through the back door, and I'm
Yep.
gone.
Yes. I can so relate to that.
Yeah, they know I was there. I've done my job for the
Yeah,
night. Let's go home and get into pajamas.
exactly. And the other thing, I've done in the past is rather than having to attend other gatherings, I'll organise gatherings at my house, which
Mhm.
means because I'm the hostess, I'm busy in the kitchen and I'm busy, handing things out. So I can't actually have deep and meaningful conversations with people.
That's pretty slick, lady.
I know, I know. But I didn't realize that was what I was doing until I reflected on it some years later. But for decades, would have these most amazing parties, and everyone would say, "Oh, parties at your place are so much fun." I go, "Yeah, that's because I'm not talking to anybody. You guys are talking. You're having fun. I'm just, the hostess with the mostest."
There you go. Hosted a Halloween party one year that people are still talking about, and that was, gosh, 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I just wore my costume and ran around the house and made sure everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be, and that was about it.
And the other thing I do when I'm attending gatherings is, particularly when there's music, I will just dance because that means I don't have to talk to people.
I'm exactly the opposite. My hat's off to you there. I have this overwhelming fear of looking like an idiot. And I had a kid make fun of me when I was in grade school. I think sixth grade, fifth grade. I was dancing, and a little girl said that, Craig keeps watching you. You should go and ask him to dance. I was like, I can't ask him to dance. I'm too shy. She's like, I'll go ask. So she walked over to where this little boy was sitting. She said, Craig, Amanda wants to know if you dance with her. And he started laughing so loud that people in the dance were looking at him. And he says, why would I ever dance with her? She dances like a chicken. So I don't dance.
Well, dancing has always been something for me that's just given me a sense of freedom. It's when I check out. It's my escapism. And I know I look like an absolute dork when I dance, and I don't care.
I love it. I love it. I need that. I need to get that don't care.
And I think I was telling you off air last night, I got some exciting news, and I was having such a wonderful time dancing on my own. And because I've got sort of floor to ceiling windows, and I was watching myself dancing, and I laughed at myself because I did look like a total dork. And then all of a sudden, my foot slipped and I landed on my butt, and now I've got a huge bruise on my butt.
Oh, oh, ouch. Oh, you poor
So,
butt.
I know, my poor butt. But yeah, anyway, I think we've gone off topic again.
Just a little bit. And we're almost running out of time. So when we get done with this list, we may have to end the episode and then finish the next episode with the long-term consequences and how to fight back. But the art of avoidance has been really fascinating so far.
Well, we can start the next episode sort of revisiting the list, and we can talk about the long-term consequences and what we can do to actually, deal with these responses.
Awesome.
What do you
That
think?
sounds great. Yeah. So we'll wrap it up here with the first part of the art of avoidance and pick it up next week.
Cool. Thank you so much, Amanda. See you.
You can find out more about Growth from Darkness through the website www.growthfromdarkness.com. You can also learn more through the Facebook page, which can be found at facebook.com/growth from darkness. Thank you.